was a rich merchant and his wife, who were of the Jewish faith. And in their old age, they were blessed with a son. And the son grew into a charming, gentle, clever, handsome boy. But it came time for him to be taken to the Midrash, the school, the house of learning. So his father, the merchant, took him to the Midrash, and he asked the rabbi, "Now, Rabbi, you will be teaching my son the story of Genesis, the beginning." "Oh no," said the rabbi. First we teach the priestly ways and the rituals." And the father said, "But how can you begin a story in the middle? A story must be from the beginning." "Oh, no, said the rabbi. "This is our curriculum that must be followed." So the merchant said, "Well, I will teach my son myself." So he went back and he asked a learned scholar to write a scroll telling the story of the beginning. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. And so with this scroll, the merchant told his son and taught him, and they spent many, many hours learning together the story of life from the beginning. Now the boy treasured this scroll beyond all else. But one day, when he was out in the garden, studying, as was his bent, the wonderful story of life, soldiers came by and gathered him up to take him away to a far distant land where he was to become a slave, like other boys who had been captured. And when he was taken there, he was thrown, along with all the others, into a dark dungeon, and all of his possessions, including his scroll, taken away from him. Now it so happened that the king of that realm was an unhappy man, restless. He could not sleep. And so, of course, when the king could not sleep, none of his advisors nor his servants could sleep either. So they all tried to find ways to placate the king, bring the musicians, bring the soothsayers. But nothing worked to bring peace to the king. And then one of his advisors came up with the thought, why don't we tell him a story? Surely there is something that will bring a story to our king. What about that cache of scrolls that we have? So, as it happened, when they went down to where these scrolls were kept, the one that was taken was that of the boy. But when it was brought back into the king's chamber, it was found that no one could understand the language, except when someone spoke up and said, "Oh, but it looks like it might be of the Jewish faith, and there is a Jewish boy that we have captured. Perhaps he can read it." And so they went, and they brought the boy up to the king's chamber, and there he saw his scroll and burst into tears. The king asked him, "Do you understand this scroll?" And the boy, with tears and sobbing, said, "Yes." So the king said, "Read it to me." So the boy began to read from his scroll the story of life from its beginning. And as the king heard the story, he felt his heart become peaceful and calm. And he closed his eyes, and for the first time, for some long while, he fell into a deep and peaceful slumber. But when he awoke, the boy was still sitting there, clutching the scroll. So the king asked him, "Why is it that you weep?" And the boy told him his story, that he had been taken from his home, his parents, who he was the only son of in their old age, and the story of how his father had had this scroll made and taught him the story of life. The king heard this story, and he himself began to weep. And he said, "You will be restored to your family along with your scroll." And dressed in fine robes and with the gold from that place, the boy was returned to his loving parents, joyful to see him. What for you does this scroll represent? What is it in this story that the scroll is a symbol of?
The transmission of the knowledge in fire to come out and the being is the source of rituals. Could it be our endeavor to know you out from the beginning?
Yes. But it has to be asked of you now. When you meet someone, when you're confronted with someone, what is it that is there in every part of a story that is told? What does this scroll represent for us?
It's the God self.
Okay. And can you give a bit of your God self? Can you give a segment of your God self? You can tell a segment of your story, but what's behind the story? What's in the story? What's around the story? What's through the story?
Everything.
Who you are. Is that wholeness? What does this scroll represent for us?
Home. Home.
Okay.
In the home.
It's a very profound story, isn't it? It's a very big question. When you share a segment of your story, which we do in every encounters, what is in that story?
The rules of existence. The rules of existence.
Yes. Like a holograph. Like a holograph.
It's a reflection.
Absolutely. Every part contains the whole. Every part contains the whole. So every story that you tell, whether it be a little segment of our life or something that's been experienced through someone else or revelation, doesn't it contain that whole? What does this scroll represent for us?
A beginning, middle, and an end.
A beginning, a middle, and an end in absolutely everything. It is imparted. Who are you? Who are you?